and welcome to Callum and Conor's documentary on Russia throughout the year of 1917. Here, Russian society saw major problems as the failure of the provisional government led to the Bolsheviks rising in popularity. This gets juicy, so grab your popcorn and buckle your seatbelt. I will now leave you with my good buddy Conor, as he will tell you what happened in the first half of 1917.
Firstly, a bit of background for Russia during 1894 to 1917 under the Romanov dynasty. The people of the Russian Empire were governed by one person, the Tsar. Since 1613, the Russian Tsar had been members of the Romanov dynasty. By law and tradition, the Tsar was the absolute ruler. Article 1 of the Fundamental Laws of the Empire, issued by Nicholas I in 1832, declared, "The Emperor of all the Russia is an autocratic and unlimited monarch. God himself ordains that all must bow to supreme power, not only out of fear, but also out of conscience." The system was extremely corrupt, with nepotism and the Tsar himself being unprepared for the job and extremely uneducated. The image I am showing is Nicholas II's family. The people of Russia called this man Little Father. Due to reasons such as World War I, food famine, and losing the support of his people, such as the army refusing him to enter Petrograd, Tsar Nicholas II abdicates on the 15th of March 1917, on the same day as National Women's Day, and on workers' strike, due to which the army joined in. As you can see here, this created a large power vacuum over Russia. Due to his abdication, the provisional government temporarily overlooked Russia for stability and how it looked at other countries such as foreign investors. The provisional government consisted of 12 conservative, liberal ex-Duma politicians under a democratic rule. They knew their time was limited, so they did not pass any laws or take the time to fully try to solve any of the country's problems. They were in joint rule with the Petrograd Soviet with a 50-50 split. The Petrograd Soviet was a large group of revolutionaries whom on their first meeting 2,000 people turned up. This was called the dual authority, and they would work in the touring palace with a man called Alexander Kerensky being the main line of communication between them both. They were ideologically opposite in their political views and would hardly ever reach consensus. On the 14th of March 1917, the Petrograd Soviet issued Order No. 1. This was that the orders of the provisional government were to be obeyed only when they did not contradict the Petrograd Soviet, giving them complete authority like the Tsar had with the fundamental laws, and like Article 48 in Germany. The dual authority was doomed to fail from the start and made the provisional government even more inactive. In April 1917, following the power vacuum, a man called Vladimir Lenin returned from recent exile back to Russia. Lenin was the leader of the Bolshevik Party, and while he was exiled for sedition in 1897, during this time the Bolshevik leaders were Stalin and Kamenev, and Lenin sent them a letter called Letters from Afar telling them to not work with the provisional government, criticizing the continued World War I involvement, and to not do accommodationism and align themselves with the army. Lenin was transported back into Russia from Switzerland with the help of Germany. This was because they knew that if Lenin got back into power and stopped their involvement with World War I, then they could, instead of fighting in the east and west, put all their resources to the west and help them win the war. Lenin returned with the April thesis calling for the only true revolutionary party, the Bolsheviks, to take action, overthrow the provisional government. It stated, no cooperation with the provisional government, a worldwide socialist revolution, end to the war, Soviets to take power, land given to the peasants, and the state to control factories and banks. Lenin has addressed the population's problems and consolidates his power. Here are a couple of Lenin's slogans he used in a video.
Peace, land and bread. Everybody sing! Peace, land and bread. A little louder now! We gather together, the people all said, peace, land and bread.
In June 1917, the army launched the June Offensive with the provisional government. This was supposedly meant to be the last big military push to muster up all their might to push the Germans and Austro-Hungary. The push started off good, but it later failed dramatically. There was mass desertion of the army, with 12,000 Russians captured trying to leave in one night. There is 400,000 casualties. In the first major thing the provisional government have done, and it's a failure. It humiliates the country, presents mismanagement, and now they are in economic despair. It is not looking good. Now, on July 1917, the July Days. It is a chance for Lenin to seize power over Russia after the provisional government's many failures into attempting to tackle the nation's major social issues, especially after the June Offensive, which caused general dissatisfaction for the provisional government, which was their last straw. It is unknown who started this protest. Either it was spontaneous protest by Petrograd-based soldiers, or the Bolsheviks were behind it. Soldiers in this protest were furious after the failure of the June offensive, and the Petrograd soldiers, with 20,000 Contract sailors plus factory workers, marched up to the Taurine Palace chanting, "All power to the Soviets." During the second march on the 4th of July, Lenin and the Bolsheviks were not sure what to do, so they hesitated. The provisional government counterattacked on this hesitation, take back power, and accused Lenin of still having links with Germany. This meant the Bolsheviks as a whole were now accused of being German agents. On the 6th of July, Lenin fled to the countryside and other Bolshevik leaders were arrested. Lenin escapes to Finland with some loyal soldiers. Kerensky imprisons leading Bolsheviks and destroys their Pravda offices. Due to the fear of pro-Tsarist backlash on the 7th of July, the Tsar and his family moved back to Siberia.
Cheers for that one, Conor. So, as you can tell, Russia was not in a good place by mid-1917. The Tsar had done a runner, leaving the provisional government and the Petrograd Soviet to put their differences aside and take control. The Bolsheviks were slowly growing, and there were 400,000 Russian casualties from the failed June offensive. It was not looking good for the Russians. Now I am going to leave you with my old pal Cal, as we shall find out if the dual authority can stabilize themselves, or if the Bolsheviks can overthrow them.
Take it away, Callum!
This is just to clarify that I was supposed to be doing July, but Conor did it as well, even though he agreed that I was doing July, but oh well. After the traumatic failure of the June offensive, people were even more dissatisfied with the provisional government. As a result of the resentment of the Russians, a large march began in Petrograd, headed for the beloved Taurine Palace. It is still unknown to this day whether this riot was a spontaneous protest or was established by Bolshevik rumours. Either way, there were thousands of Petrograd soldiers and 20,000 Kronstadt sailors, all chanting, "All power to the Soviets."
Можешь поделиться сном everyday. Перетяги, дышу музыкой на зло. Я тону в этой саге, пока дымится нутро.
All power to the Soviets. All power to the Soviets.
It was all looking good for the Bolsheviks, but then Lenin did something that surprised everyone. He hesitated. He thought about the consequences of this march and how the Bolsheviks could be seen as terrorists.
Hold him off! You have to go! Go! It was an honor. No sacrifice to bring. Go.
The provisional government saw this as an opportunity for a counterattack, and they swiftly exposed Lenin and called him a German traitor. Lenin then fled to Finland while the other Bolshevik leaders were imprisoned by Kerensky.
Alright. Oh, yeah.
All Pravda offices were dismissed and the Bolsheviks were over. They were over until they were later released by Kerensky and were armed with automatic machine guns in order to fight off General Kornilov on the 25th of August. During this affair, Trotsky was made the Petrograd Soviet leader and he recruited 10,000 trained army men known as the Red Guard. So now the Bolsheviks were seen as heroes and nicknamed the Defenders of Petrograd. They also had their own trained army of 10,000 men. Meanwhile, the provisional government saw the chaos and knew that Russia needed an elected professional leading group, and the election was announced to be on the 12th of November. After their major success, in September of 1917, Lenin sent a letter to the Central Committee of Bolsheviks saying that now was the time to take control. However, Zinoviev and Kamenev sent a letter back saying it was too risky. Soon after, Trotsky's Military Revolutionary Committee was formed. This made the Bolsheviks look like a big threat, with their own military, and by the 25th of September, the Bolsheviks had complete control over the Petrograd Soviet. Kerensky then set up a pre-parliament, including a variety of parties, for a broad representation. However, this was a mistake as the Bolsheviks disrupted meetings to delay the process of work. As revenge on the Bolsheviks, on the 20th of October, Kerensky closes down the Bolshevik newspaper, the Pravda. This signifies to Lenin that it is now or never, and he says that history will not forgive us if we do not assume power now. In late October, the MRC planned to take over. They attacked various PG buildings, such as the post office, allowing them to control the news. Kerensky was now down to his final reserves to defend the Winter Palace, the Women's Battalion of Death. However, Trotsky and his MRC near enough walked through them, and successfully seized power while Kerensky fled to USA disguised as a nun. On the 25th of October at 10 a.m, the MRC announced their profound status and power, and the provisional government were no more. Throughout November and December, Lenin released some early decrees. His first decree was a decree of peace, an appeal to foreign countries to enter a democratic peace without annexations. His second decree was about land, stating that the Bolsheviks gave approval to all the land seizures from the peasants. This decree was pointless, as the peasants had already captured most of the land, but it made the Bolsheviks look like they had control over the situation. This same idea applies for the decree of workers' control. It instructed the workers' committees to maintain the strictest order and discipline. He also introduced the Vysenka, which was a Supreme Council of National Economy. This group helped to nationalize banks and railways. It cancelled the foreign debt and improved the Russian transport system. His final decree was the Decree on Nationalization, which secured the ownership of all major industrial enterprises under the government. So, what was the main reason the Bolsheviks took control? It was mainly due to Lenin's smart decision-making and catchy slogans, such as
Peace, land and
but was also due to the foolishness of Kerensky and the inactiveness of the provisional government.